Welcome to Artist Tales, the podcast that features and celebrates artists from different walks of life. I'm your host, Heather Martin, and in this episode, I'm chatting with Ellie Laycock, an award-winning British artist who explores the urban environment and its impact on residents, ideas of power and control, politics, and the passage of time. Welcome, Ellie.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for being on the podcast. So would you like to tell me a bit about yourself? I mean, I did sort of talk about who you are, but just tell me a bit more about yourself and your background as an artist.
Sure. So I started doing a foundation course at Norwich School of Art, and then I went to Kingston University where I did a fine art degree in sculpture. Was working with metal a lot, welding, casting resins. But I also started to get interested in photography at that time. I was lucky enough to go on a bus trip from New York to Los Angeles. It took about 3.5 weeks, and I had a camera with me, and I'd actually borrowed my friend's old analog video camera as well, because this was like a massive adventure. And just, the landscapes over there, the scale of what I was seeing was just really feeding into this developing love for photography, which is what I eventually ended up specialising in and working in commercial sense afterwards. So I didn't technically study it, but kind of moved into it in the end. And now what I do is mainly photography, but it's become a sort of expanded practice really in the last few years, which encompasses textiles, some sculpture and experimental film making as well.
In a way, you've touched on my next question in terms of, what you do artistically. So it sounds like you have a few things that you do in terms of, whether it's photography and other things.
Yes, I think the photography that I do is documentary. So it's capturing what already exists. And then the other work is making things that don't exist. So they're things that I feel like they want to be birthed into the world. And my job is to make that happen. So I enjoy taking things from concept to reality, I suppose. So the textiles thing, I have a side hustle. I run a business called Hunted and Stuffed, which is an e-commerce textile business where we upcycle vintage kimonos into throws and cushions. So there's always something textile-y going on in the background. And there's also a history of textiles that runs through my family. So my roots are up north. My grandmother worked on a loom in a textiles factory in Bradford, and so did a lot of her ancestors. So there's about 5. I think I'm a 5th generation textile worker, but I work in textiles within my art practice. So I end up making things like I've been making banners for unions that I think should exist. So there's always a political thread that runs through my work, and a sort of fight for social justice, I would say. And with textiles as well, it's like the language of women. If you think about the history of textiles around the world, historically it's mainly women that produce them, and they tell stories through them as well. And that could be through, fair isle stitch or a certain way of knotting a rug, and that's a global repository of women's stories, which I kind of find fascinating as well.
Do you find that that kind of storytelling or story making, I was going to say, I guess it's a bit of both, can it be very subtle and very subversive in a way? You don't necessarily notice it when you see an object.
Yes, absolutely. And that makes me think of all kinds of things, but it makes me think of the sort of Afghan war rugs and the motifs used in them. So that, you could have a rug and hidden in it is like an AK-47, because that's telling the story of conflict around the people that are making the object. It's like they're putting their life stories into the objects and communicating in a way. It also makes me think of, there was a textile with a woman, I think she was in a mental institution, and she used her long hair to sew into, a scrap of fabric. I don't know where the fabric had come from, maybe from her top or something, so I don't know. I just find it's quite an interesting area. And it's because one thing I've recently really come to believe is that it's possible for them to be creative. Like there's this idea that, oh, you have to be skilled or only certain people, but actually everyone has the capacity. Now, not everyone might want to be, but I think there's a lot of people who could have more creativity in their lives, but maybe they weren't encouraged at school or whatever. And so they think, oh, well, I'm not creative. And actually, cooking a meal can be creative, or, skipping down the street or having a little dance or singing to yourself in the shower. It's all creativity, I think. And I think it's such a fundamentally important thing for humans that I just think it should just be encouraged and celebrated as much as possible and not squashed and not, have it shamed out of people,
Yeah, or have a very rigid view of what art is, that kind of definition.
Yeah.
And it was, it made me think as you're talking, I guess a couple of things that, particularly the role of school, I think, in people's lives. And, to hear that a message, as you say, of you're not this or you're not that, you're not creative, you're not technical, you're not, you're not into maths or whatever, and how much that can have an impact on a young person, but also people's perceptions of what's good and what's bad, what's art and what's not. So I remember for every series of my podcast, I'll ask people who I think are creative, who I think are artistic. I remember having a conversation with someone and asking somebody who in the end decided not to be a guest, which is fine. And her partner was like, no, you're not an artist, because, she was into playing music. And I just found that quite shocking that, this person's view of art was excluded. It kind of was very limited and very narrow, and it excluded the musical, side of things and people who could be musical. And I just found that quite shocking in some ways.
Yeah, that makes me feel really sad hearing that, because like, who gives you permission to be what you want to be? Like when I started working as a commercial photographer, I started out as an assistant to photographers. It took me ages to feel comfortable saying I am a photographer. Ages. But then once I did start saying that, I kind of settled into it. And it was only, I'm going to say, well, it's in the last 10 years, I started to say I am an artist. And I felt like I was like kidding everyone when I first started asserting that about myself, But that's what I am. And now I've been making music. So now I'm starting to say, well, I'm a musician as well. And that feels really weird at the moment because it's still new and I haven't like grown into it, or it's not comfortable. It's like a coat that I'm not comfortable wearing it just yet, but I am putting it on. And I would encourage everyone to try on these coats.
What kind of music do you make?
Well, I mean,
or would like to make, I should say, or both, maybe.
Yeah, well, no, I have recorded. I'm releasing a single in a couple of weeks, my first one.
Wow.
Which I'm really excited about, but also terrified. But I think, it's out of your comfort zone and in these places where you feel vulnerable and you feel exposed, but also excited. And, this is where magic things happen, when you are extending yourself, when you're trying new things, It's just, I guess over the years, you just sort of toughen up and you're like, well, I have to put the thing, whatever it is, whether it's a piece of art or I have to put it out into the world. Otherwise, what's the point, And then once it goes into the world, there's going to be feedback. And that's the terrifying bit, because it's like, well, what if the feedback's terrible, But it has to go out into the world. There's no way around it. So you have to learn to just deal with that and toughen up and,
And in a way, who are you making the art for, I guess, is that, something that's come to mind.
Yeah, well, that is a really good question. I mean, I'm making it for myself, but I'm also making it for everyone else. And by that, I mean, I make it for myself because it's my fundamental way to express myself. And it feels really important that I feel like it's the thing I'm meant to be doing. It's my raison d'etre. So that's why I do it. But because a lot of my work is sort of highlighting injustice, I feel like I'm on a bit of a social mission as well. So there's some activism mixed in of trying to make the world a better place, basically, for others and me and everyone. So that's what drives me.
I was going to say that sounds like one of your motivations. Is it quite a key motivation for you? Or, are there a few things that trying to get across, whether it's, social justice or, I don't know, reflecting back sort of what's happening in the world?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak to my own experience, and I can't represent others unless they give me permission to do that. So, but, my experience is being a single parent, it's being on a low income, it's being from a working class background, it's trying to make work in the face of not having any money, or not being able to afford a studio, not being able to weld things on my kitchen table or cast resins because I've got a child in the house. And it's very limited. It can be very limited. But all that does is just sort of strengthen your tenacity and drive and creative thinking, problem solving. How do I tackle these things? How do I still get to do what I want to do, even in the face of all of these things? But I think it's also just sort of who I am. I mean, I'm involved in pretty much everything that I'm involved with is sort of trying to improve things.
And I think it's so important that, particularly in art, there's a multitude of voices. Because I think, quite often what is often defined as art is, particularly the upper classes, and if people in lower incomes or lower classes, and, I personally don't like the class system, but, there's a lot of assumptions made by people about people in lower income. And I think it's really important to have, I personally think, I don't know what your view is, to have different voices coming out and actually being authentic and honest about your life experience.
Yeah, I agree with you. But I mean, in the current climate, I would say, especially with the way that some social media is going, if you admit that you are on a low income, or God forbid, you need, some benefits or something, then you really are opening yourself up to quite a lot of vile abuse, basically. So there's being open, and then there's sort of being open.
True. Yeah.
Not fully open.
Yeah.
So it's difficult.
And that's, I think, a fair point. You're right in the sense of kind of, I don't know, it feels like quite a nastiness at the moment in terms of, perhaps people in lower income or even immigration and sort of benefit scroungers. And you're just thinking, really?
Yeah, well, I mean, there was quite a sort of concerted effort by Channel 5 to sort of, with, Benefit Street and all of that to kind of, they call it like poverty porn, don't they?
Mm.
But I think in general with, Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter, that it's lurched to the right. I mean, there's lots of governments lurching to the right. There's a lot going on. Feels like a very hostile environment, very strange time to be alive. And also with AI scraping artists' work to train up models to spew out similar work. I mean, the artists are really under threat at the moment. And there's this narrative as well. There's no, especially in the UK, well, in England, there's not really any support for artists. The arts and creative subjects are being stripped out of the curriculum at school level. There's not really much support for artists other than Arts Council grants, which are really hard to get. And you need to know the language, which a lot of working class artists wouldn't necessarily know. Yeah, I just think it's really infuriating because you have people in charge who don't respect the arts at all or support them. And yet the whole of society relies so heavily on artists and creators for all of their things that they consume, film, music, television programs, theatre, all of the things that people enjoy listening to or watching. That's all made by artists. And why are they not being, why are they not being supported more to make more of that stuff? I just find it very odd.
Yeah, and I do think there's to be human is to be creative. There's a creative or artistic side to everyone, even if people don't think there is, or at least the potential. And it is, and I do agree about the AI. It's a bit of an unknown beast at the moment. It has the potential could be aspects of it of being very positive, but it also can be used for the detriment. And I agree with you. I agree with the worry about, is it going to, what's it going to do to the arts?
Yeah, I mean, I have one of my best friends is an actress, and she was telling me that there were the strikes recently in America because contracts were coming out saying, we'll get you as an actor to come into this casting studio for the day, we'll record your voice, and basically then like give you 50 quid or whatever. You go, and then we've got your voice, and then we can like use that like in perpetuity to so that voice artist no longer has any agency, because the thing their unique thing, which is their voice, which they would be paid to come and read this and come and read that, like small print on a contract, suddenly they don't even own it anymore. So no one's going to hire them because the unique thing's been sort of commandeered away from them. Do you see what I mean? It's very, very weird.
Well, there's that. And also, I think there is a thing around, I think even doing video, like having deep fake videos in terms of, it could be somebody looking like Obama or, or whoever. I'm just thinking, okay, Obama's a political figure, but you could have any artist or any actor. They get their image and they, through AI or through technology, they can make them do things and say things that they wouldn't normally say or do.
Yeah. I mean, it gets really Orwellian really quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think this is where we really, as a society, need to work through, the place of AI and its limits.
Yeah, and sooner rather than later.
I agree.
I mean, there was a quote by Zuckerberg recently who was talking about, the scraping of data from artists, and he just said, well, because there's some backlash against it, because art is copyrighted, so it's not allowed to just scrape everyone's work. But he's done it anyway. And he said, like, the individual work of most creators isn't valuable enough for it to matter. And I'm like, well, if it's not valuable, why are you scraping it, That's just complete dismissal, not only of artists themselves, but of their copyright. You know what it is? It's this power imbalance. This is something that, I react to quite strongly. It's this abuse of power, Facebook versus little artists.
And just coming back to your own art, I mean, I know you do a lot of sort of social stuff and, playing around with different ideas. Who or what has influenced you in terms of your art and how you kind of explore things?
Well, I would say definitely got to mention Julia Cameron and her book, The Artist's Way, because that it's about creative recovery. And I first read that book, I think, 2017, and I just had an epiphany. It's a sort of workbook with exercises in. It's a 12-week. You read a chapter a week, you do the exercises. And it just massively unblocked me and my practice. I didn't realise that I was blocked in that way until I did that. And it unlocked it answered a lot of questions. Or it gave me the tools that I could answer a lot of questions that I didn't even realise I had. But after that, I really could take myself seriously as an artist and started being an artist and really going for it. So that was a massive influence. But then when I think about people that I think of as sort of heroes, David Byrne I find really interesting, the guy from Talking Heads. And what I like about him is he does so many different, his creativity comes out in so many different ways. So he's got the whole music thing. But, he wrote a musical called Here Lies Love with Fatboy Slim about Imelda Marcos. And he's written books, he makes art. And I just love that. I love that, the idea that someone is so sort of full of creativity that it comes out in all of these different ways. Because that speaks to me, because I'm always doing different things. And I have always been like that. Even when working as a commercial photographer, and I was told, you've really got to specialise in one area. You've got to do portraiture, or you've got to do interiors or fashion, but you've got to pick one. And I'm like, oh, why do I have to pick one? I love interiors and I like doing portraits. And I've always thought, it always feels like I don't want to be in one little box. I've loved having an expansive practice. So when I see people like David Byrne who also have an expansive practice, that just really appeals to me. And also I've found Sleaford mods quite inspiring as well. And I'm aware now that a lot of my people that I'm looking at are musicians, but that's all under the banner of creativity to me. So, but what I like about Sleaford mods is this sort of post-punk attitude of, I don't care, I'm just going to do it. And I don't care if it's perfect. I'm going to do the thing, and it's not going to be, it might be a bit wonky, it might be a bit dodgy, but it doesn't matter. And that was really freeing as someone who's sort of, could be a bit of a perfectionist. Everything's got to be perfect, and that can be quite restrictive sometimes. So
that's the thing I find with, sorry to interrupt, that's one thing I find with rock, kind of the rock and roll, is there's a raw energy to it, kind of a rawness to it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can see what you mean about it. It kind of challenges that of perfection. So I'm a bit of a perfectionist myself, and just let it go.
Yeah.
You know?
It's really hard when you're a perfectionist, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just let it go. What do you mean? No, not till it's ready. Not to, but then sometimes that, the pursuit of perfection gets in the way of getting things done. There's a middle ground there, a happy place between the two. And then, George Orwell, very fundamental to me, I think. 1984, read that when I was quite young. I think I bought it from the library for 50p. I think it was probably like 1986, and someone thought it was out of date and stuck it on the sale trolley. And then people like William Morris, who's a socialist activist. Yeah, Kay Tempest. They have an amazing way of not only connecting with the crowd, but having the crowd connect with itself, and people in the crowd who don't know each other connecting with those around them. It's a very powerful thing that they're able to do. They've written a book called On Connection as well, but that's a magical
book. Yeah. Are they a poet?
Yes, it's sort of spoken word, but also musical. They've released albums and a tour, gigs and stuff.
Yeah, because I do follow them on again, social media. I can't remember which one, but yeah, I always thought they were a poet, but yeah, thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, well, they are as well. I think they do more than one thing. Hey, it's the way to go.
That leads me back to a question I wanted to ask you, and I think it was a David Byrne you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
What made that really kind of struck me as well, because I feel, the words that came into my mouth or head, or the phrase, was pigeonholed, and I struggle with that myself, because I'm a photographer and I've gotten now into podcasting, I've gotten into ambient sound a bit, and it feels like it's taken me a long time to start exploring other things in that creativity. And so what you said around David really hit me and struck me, that in many ways, I think many of us have different aspects. They're not one thing. And I do find it really, like you, quite frustrating of, Heather, you're this, or, Ellie, you're that, or, you're kind of, people know you for one thing and they hang their hat on that, and it's like, actually, I'm more than that.
Yeah, I know. I feel like we should be slashes with this slash, that slash, model slash actor slash chef slash.
Yeah. But I think many artists are multidisciplinary, and we may know them for one particular thing, but a lot of artists I've come across do many things, whether artistically or they do an art form, but they're into other things as well. And it's fascinating what people get up to, I have to say.
Yeah. Well, I think if you have, I think if you're an artist, then you are inquiring about something essentially, or examining something. And so if you have that kind of mind, it's not a big leap to think about different ways of doing things. I can see why people could branch out, but then I don't know. I mean, it's tricky, isn't it? Because to kind of get really, really good at something, you have to practice a lot, don't you? Do it a lot. So I'm not really sure where I'm going with this train of thought, to be honest.
No, well, I think, it's kind of, in many ways, you might have a thing that you're particularly strong at, but it's not to say you can't dabble in other things, or you might have 2 or 3 things you're very good at. And I think also it is partly aptitude. I have picked up things that I are interested in, that sort of thing. I like music. Can't really say I'm a particularly strong musician. I used to play the violin and I was proficient enough, but I was not the strongest. But what it's done is given me an appreciation of music, of, both classical and non-classical. Couldn't hold a tune to save my life, but it's given me something that, I feel very fortunate I had that exposure as a young person.
Yeah. Well, and that's why it's so important that these things are in the curriculum, or there is access somehow for young people. Otherwise, they grow up without having ever touched these things. And I think that's just such a shame. The wider experiences that young people can have just gives them more scope for things they might want to do. And you don't always have to do things for a job. You might just want to do it as a hobby, and that's fine. But if, you don't know, if you've never had the chance to be exposed to it, you don't know, you've no idea if you would be into it or not. So that's why exposure to things is good, I think.
I agree. I think it allows people to, experience different things and sort of open the mind, to other possibilities.
Broadens the mind, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Now, you've probably touched on this a little bit, in our conversation, but Perhaps you can just talk about some of the challenges you may have faced or are facing being an artist.
I've just turned 50, so I'm, apparently
50 years young.
you can't be an emerging artist at 50.
Oh,
So,
two fingers to society on that one, I have to say. It's tiresome.
So yeah, it's very frustrating because I was doing other things like raising a family. Just yeah. Really, it's not being rich and not being well connected. Basically, are my issues. So it just means it's harder, but I'm not going to let that stop me. You develop a lot of resilience, I think. You have to kind of just keep applying for things as much as you can. I tend to have a bit of a rule of I don't really pay to play. There's a lot of photography competitions and things out there where, they want quite a lot of money to enter. And you could easily spend a lot doing that. So, if there's anyone out there who's on a low income and is doing photography, I would say go for the free ones first. Or, set yourself an annual budget, say, right, I'm going to give myself 60 quid or whatever it might be for the year. I mean, that's not much, but, and I'm going to pick and choose what I'm going to apply for. And some of the big ones now will let you, I think there's a recognition that, this is a barrier to people on lower, economic strata. So they'll let you put one in. I mean, whether they actually look at them, I don't know. But yeah, you just have to keep plugging away, I think, because otherwise you give up and then that's the end. So applying for things is also good because it does help you build resilience. And once you get no's or you don't get any reply at all, which is worse, after a few of those, they just start to kind of be, water off the duck's back. And you're like, oh, okay, well, not this time. In fact, I've got a folder called Not This Time, Try Again. And when I apply for something and it's a rejection, I kind of move the whole folder into that folder of like, oh, well, never mind, keep trying. It's basically as a little reminder to myself, it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Don't take it personally. It doesn't mean that you're rubbish.
Exactly.
It just means it hasn't worked out for reasons that you don't know what the reasons are.
And it's quite difficult when you are submitting things because there are probably going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of pieces of work, pieces of art, whatever that artwork is. And there's elements of personal preference from the judges. There's an element of who else is submitting stuff and wanting it to all work together and that sort of thing. And, I remember I've not submitted much myself. I think it was partly due to shyness and also feeling a bit discouraged. And as I'm getting older now, I'm not much younger than you, but it's kind of like actually just go out and do it. And what I'm finding is as I'm showing things to people over the years, particularly more recently, what I'm noticing is I can show an image to one person or a group of people. They'll have a certain reaction, show it to somebody else or another group of people, and they'll react in a very different way.
Mm.
And like you say, it's not that what I'm producing is, it's not that it's bad. It's, I think it's quite good. And generally the feedback's good, but I find it really fascinating how you get the really different reaction to things. And I find it very difficult. Like I'm trying to put stuff through and, think I'm good and not get in or not, not quite almost. And it can be quite disheartening, but you're right. You need to be, you do build up that resilience and persistence really.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just part of the process as you do it more and more. And it's good because the first time it happens, you're like, it's the end of the world, but you have to keep trying. I mean, it's still upsetting, whatever, if it's a really great opportunity and you think you're a good fit, your work is a good fit for it, and especially if you put in a lot of time and effort to pull the application together. But it is a numbers game and just don't take it personally. It's hard, but
yeah, you'll get through in the end, I think, is what we're saying, I hope.
Yeah, there'll be one that comes good and then it'll all seem worth it.
Yeah, definitely.
That's the theory.
That's the hope, yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess the final question for me is sort of what kind of projects are coming up? What sorts of things are on the horizon for you, do you think?
Well, I've just come to the end of a big project. I actually we formed a collective, myself and 4 other artists called Fractured Land Collective. And that's Leanne Chan, Ellie Reid, Jane Peacock and Caroline Thompson and myself. We just had an exhibition at Discover Bucks Museum, where the museum invited us in to look around their collections and pull out pieces, objects, artworks, paintings, gold coins, things from their collections that we could make work in response to. So the show was called This Fractured Land, Stories from the Past and Future. And out of that project, I also produced a book with Jane, and I think it's nearly sold out. I think there's only about 5 copies left available on my website if anyone wants to buy the last 5. So that was a really interesting experience working with the museum in that way and with the curators. And the body of work that I was showing in that was about Kett's Rebellion, which was a peasants' revolt in Norfolk in 1549. The project was called Commotion Time, which is what that rebellion was known as locally. And it was about enclosures and theft of the land by the rich, basically, and, taking the commons away from the poor. And the commons were communal patches of earth with resources on that everyone was able to share. So like twigs and wood for heating, fishing, grazing your animals, that kind of thing. So it was a community asset, basically, being fenced off for rich people to make deer parks. So the injustice of that, I'm like, so Robert Kett was basically a local yeoman. He wasn't even sort of on the poor end of things. He was more towards the Lord's side of it, but he took it on, basically, and there was an uprising. And so I've made work about that and the kind of things that they were asking for, like all bondmen be made free, affordable rent. Because I thought these are issues that 500 years later, we still need these things sorting out. This is the same struggle in different time, same struggle. And so that's why I thought it would be interesting to explore that, but through the lens of today, really. And actually with these sort of free ports and special economic zones that are on the horizon, which are basically a modern iteration of carving out, stealing a piece of land for your own profit. Only this case, it's not, landowners doing it, it's corporations. So I just think things go in cycles, things repeat, history repeats, stories repeat. And if we don't learn from what went before, we're going to end up making the same mistakes over and over and over again, which, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different result, they say, is the definition of insanity. So I thought my work is about these kinds of things, really. It's like, what are we doing? What is this? Like, why are we doing this way? It's terrible. It hurts people. Let's stop doing it like that because it's awful. That's the bottom line for most of my work, really. It's a cry for common sense.
Well, common sense and compassion.
Compassion, yeah, exactly. So I'm in this weird space now, so I haven't started my next project, but I've just finished quite a major one. But I've got this music thing going on, so I'm at the moment focusing on that. As I say, I'm releasing a single, and I've got an album lined up. It's just like I've gone completely sideways. But I'm just going with it because that's what wants to be birthed at the moment. So I'm just facilitating it.
Fair enough. So when's the single and album being launched? Like, what are the dates?
So the single comes out on the 11th of October.
2024, yeah.
2024, yeah. And the album, I don't know yet. It's all mastered and ready to go, but I'm on quite a steep learning curve. So I've realised there's quite a lot of other work that you have to do apart from just making the music, turns out. So, yeah, but probably I would say the first half of 2025, that probably will be coming out.
I thought I was going to ask you the last question earlier, but I guess I have a few quick ones now. What kind of music is it?
So I would say it's somewhere between UK hip-hop and electronic and experimental.
Yeah, no, it sounds very interesting. I'd be up to listening to that, to be fair. And so will the music be launched on like Spotify or where? How do people access it?
It will be on Spotify, Amazon Music, all of them, as far as I know. It's being digitally distributed to all of those platforms, which is kind of terrifying. But I'm recording under the name Eleanor Else, not my name. A little bit of a mask there.
Fair enough.
So don't tell anyone.
I won't. Mum's the word. Mum's the word.
Yes.
Thanks, Ellie. It's been really great speaking with you.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been lovely speaking with you too.
And good luck with the launch of the single and the album.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you listening to this episode with Ellie. I hope you enjoyed it. For more information about Ellie, including her social media handles, check out the episode notes. I'd really appreciate it if you could also rate and review the podcast in the podcast apps. In the next episode, I have a really interesting conversation with Marilyn Fontaine, who is an East London mixed media artist who creates magical, intense, and witty narratives with her mystical overtones. I look forward to you joining me in the next episode.